and I hope I'm going to show the importance of the ocean in terms of humanity, and particularly in terms of human health. I'm linked with a number of organizations around the world, and I'm going to be talking about one or two of them as we go on. So, as we all know, we are in an era of climate change. We know the global land and ocean temperatures are increasing considerably. We know the sea levels are rising because of melting glaciers and melting ice caps. We also know that there's an increase in the percentage of very active hurricanes worldwide because they get their energy from oceans. Ocean temperature is going up, so there's more energy to feed those hurricanes. It's not that there are more hurricanes, but they tend to be more powerful. And the other thing is, of course, because of the high carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, because of the chemistry, you're getting more CO2, more carbonate going into the ocean, H2CO3, and of course you're getting more ocean acidification, and that is very serious for all the living systems that live in the ocean, which use carbonate skeletons, because those are becoming more brittle in general. In 2015, the United Nations developed 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the aim was that they are all going to be implemented by 2030. I'm sure you know that doesn't look as if it's going to happen. However, what I'm going to be talking about is some of the systems that we can develop and use collectively and collaboratively to at least get some way towards those goals, whether it's life below water, whether it's life on land, climate action, energy, but particularly quality education. And I've been working for some time with a number of institutes on getting those sustainable development goals together. Another thing that I've been working on, which is very important throughout the world, is working towards personalised and precision medicine. There's a lot of interest in this. Obviously, you could argue that in China, they've been using personalised medicine for many, many years. How effective it was, of course, is a different matter. What we're interested in now, because we know how to sequence human genomes, sequencing is becoming cheaper and cheaper. The whole area of what I call omics, that's genomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, is there for us all to use and to develop that for individuals. We don't want medicines that are over the population, that can be very risky. We want medicines that can be prescribed for individuals. So it's not just personalized and precision medicine. Prescription is also very much part of that. And I'm going to be talking about some of the techniques that I've been working on with my colleagues. So globally, about 20 million people suffer from cancer, and an awful lot of them will die this year. And we know that that increase, at least in the majority, can be attributed to longevity and smoking, as well as in the deterioration of health-related lifestyles. So we often think of cancer as a genetic disease, but environmental factors, particularly epigenetics, and I'm going to be talking about that in relation to plants, from air pollution to viral threats and beyond, play a very important role in cancer pathogenesis. And what I'm interested in is getting the balance much more, leading to socioeconomic and geographic equity. And I'm going to be mentioning some of that. The scientific rationale that sort of work that I've been doing in collaboration these days is how do organisms adapt and evolve in extreme environments? Because if we can get a handle on that, we can much better understand how the rest of us can cope with all the things that are thrown at us. Now, when the genome of the first plant, the Arabidopsis, was sequenced in 2000, one of the guys who was involved in sequencing of that genome said, actually, sequencing this plant is more important than sequencing the human genome. And that might shock, it was intended to shock at the time, but if you think about it, what that means is you can do things with plants that you can't do with human beings. And that gives us, I think, a real handle on improving food security. And I'm going to be talking about that. Our first study on that was published in 2009, where we showed that photosynthetic metabolism was highly cooperative regulation under changing environments, under water stress and high CO2 conditions, exactly what you get in climate change. And the pathways from the chloroplast to the perioxysome to the mitochondrion collaborated together to mitigate against these conditions. That was really, I think, very exciting at that time. Since then, we've been working on the effect of drought, and you can see the effect of drought on the left-hand side there, going from top to bottom. And the interesting thing is that the mechanism here involved not only changes in the osmosis, the osmotic potential within the plant cells, but oxidative damage. And oxidative damage, I suppose, is the main scientific theme which is going through a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. Long time ago, when I was first in Oxford, I worked with the inorganic chemistry department and a collaborator in the States, and my research student at the time, a wonderful guy called Simon Wolf, alas, no longer with us, developed a mechanism for the oxidation of sugars, glucose autooxidation, and that's very important today. And there are a number of workers who've gone on from that, particularly Professor Paul Thornalley, who was one of our collaborators at the time when he was in the inorganic chemistry department. And we developed this new idea, and it's still very relevant, particularly in diabetic complications. But it's not just in that. What we're looking at here is that you get an induction of these very reactive oxygen species like superoxide, like hydroxide radicals, and you therefore have an increase in the enzymes and mechanisms that are trying to limit that oxidation that damages both proteins and DNA. Another element I said was epigenetics. And here we have the mechanism, one of the main mechanisms, DNA methylation of cysteine residues on the DNA. Other residues can also be methylated, but this is mainly the mechanism, and it typically acts to repress gene transcription. So this is going to affect the transcriptome, and this is a way by which the environment can actually influence what's happening at the genome level, and it's also heritable, and we and many others have shown that. This is a rather busy slide, but it's just some of the techniques that we can use now in bioinformatics. Some of you may be very familiar with these, looking at how genes can be stimulated in certain conditions. Transcription factors, reactive oxygen species scavengers, stress response genes, photosynthetic genes, and abscisic acid signaling at the top left there. And the overall mechanism is in the center and shows again the importance there that ROS, the reactive oxygen species, which stimulates many of these new transcriptions that come in the plants. And these sort of techniques are very exciting, and we can use them then to look at the influence of elevation in plants, particularly in early flowering. I've been doing quite a lot of work with colleagues in Tibet, which is very high altitude, about 4,000 meters high. And the question is, when that Qinghai Tibet plateau was raised along with the Himalayas, how did the organisms that were on that plateau, that became the plateau, how did they adapt? If you're a plant, then it's very important that you get early pollination. And what we found in this particular plant, very similar to Arabidopsis, it's pennycress. What we found that there was a mutation in a single gene in the flowering locus that gave rise to early flowering. So this plant therefore has the advantage of being pollinated early due to this single gene mutation. We published that about 4 years ago. We've then gone on to look at other plants that are very important in Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine can tell us a great deal, and it's a very big growth area at the moment. And we can use all the omics to look at how we can, well, first of all, what's happening in the natural plants, and then we can use that to modify the plants to produce more of what we want. And this is wild hawthorn, a Crataegus species, and what we find is that fruit flavor formation is linked very much to flavonoid biosynthesis. Flavonoids are antioxidants, and they are very present, as I'm sure you know, in tea and coffee and various other things that we ingest. And they're very important in limiting the reactive oxygen species that I was speaking about. And we've shown that the differentially expressed genes and metabolites are very much related to flavonoid biosynthesis. So this gives us a handle on the production of better hawthorn species and cultivation of species that and varieties that can be very helpful to human health. We know a warmer global climate can cause mutations to have more severe consequences for health. And I've been working with colleagues, particularly at Tongji University in Shanghai, to develop machine learning methods to bring together an awful lot of information on DNA databases with clinical information in text. So what we've done in a number of projects that I'm going to talk about is to use these techniques, these machine learning techniques, to produce software which researchers and others in the pharmaceutical industry can use to have much better information about disease ontology, about gene ontologies, and also about drugs and drug repurposing. You might be interested to know there was a brand new review on machine learning, AI, and predictive medicine, slightly different to this, which came out yesterday in the Journal of Human Genetics. So you might, if you're interested in this, you might like to look at the latest issue of the Journal of Human Genetics. What we've done is look at this virus mutations and see which virus mutations are related to different diseases. So we've developed this particular tool, a rule-based optimization tool, and constructed a website which will allow people to link gene mutations to particular diseases. There's the user interface, and it uses natural language processing in a way that gives a very high score to look at genes in viruses that are important, for example, flu virus and severe acute respiratory, the coronavirus 2. And that was published last year, and it's freely available. That was the sort of first of our papers. We then went on to look at something else, tumor mutational burden. which is a biomarker for predicting the response and effect of immune checkpoint inhibitors. Very, very important in looking at the immune response and treatment of immune-related diseases. So we looked at the differentially expressed genes of high and low tumor mutational burden types. We did various plots, all the sort of things that you use now using these bioinformatics techniques, and we showed that a particular JAK1 signaling system strongly correlated with gene expression in colorectal cancer, and that I think is very exciting. We published that about a couple of years ago. Here's the data. In colorectal cancer, Janus kinase and JAK1 expression was significantly correlated with CD8 T cell infiltration, and that is on the right-hand side there from the experiments that we did. And this shows that these sort of machine learning techniques can then give you information about the mechanism of particular diseases, and I think that's very exciting, because then you can develop various drugs to look after them. So the tumor mutational burden related gene, this JAK1, could enhance the immune activity in colorectal cancer. So that is a potential target for drug development there. We've now gone on to look at gene ontologies, that is the relationship between genes in different diseases, and then how that can be used using relation expression in drug development. This is an overview of our approach. This is again with colleagues at Tongji University in Shanghai, which links all the gene data, the gene database data, with a lot of clinical and other data, which is text-based. So we use millions of sentences in the literature and used classical, now classical machine learning techniques to tell us which genes are important in particular diseases, looking for gene pairs and gene function prediction through gene-gene similarity scores. And here we have, as it were, an overview of our novel explainable gene ontology fingerprint method. Again, this is freely available from last year to improve gene functional explication and prediction. Again, we can use it predictively to look at gene ontology, gene relationships in particular diseases, similarities and discrepancies among tumors at the gene ontology level, and then go on to predict gene functions with explicit connections to tumors. And our latest paper, published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research just a few months ago, uses biomedical relation extraction, again a classic, now classic machine learning technique, to conduct systematic biomedical studies for knowledge mining, linking these machine learning techniques to actual biomedical studies. There's our flowchart, and you can look at this in the paper, of course, and our unified medical language system, which links, as I said, all the gene data, the transcriptomics data, with text that has been written. And that can be used, as I said at the beginning, to look at drug development, existing drug identification patterns, and novel drug examples. So in number D there at the bottom, we can look at examples for angiotensin converting enzyme, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, obviously interleukin, the Janus kinase that I mentioned before, and of course TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. So what is exciting about this, it gives a handle on the potential for new drug development, but even more importantly, I think, drug repurposing, because with drug repurposing, you don't need to go through phase 3 clinical trials, much cheaper, much quicker, and I think that's very exciting tool that anyone can use there. But we don't just do the classic techniques, now classic, of machine learning. We also look at the physicality of cells. And as an example, this is with colleagues at Changchun University of Science and Technology, and they have a very big research development unit in Zhongshan, which is in the Pearl River Delta, along with Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So it's a real hub of research development in China. And what we use there is atomic force microscopy, which can provide biomarker information for what we've done, which is UVB-induced chromosome damage assessment in cells. And here we can see the actual pictures of the chromosome damage, how it can be damaged, and we can measure down to the nanometer level how the chromosome can change. We've also used atomic force microscopy to link the omics techniques that I've been talking about with physical properties, again, in cancer cells and metastasis, for looking at both the biological background and also the physics of the cell. That was published a couple of months ago in Molecular Pharmaceutics, using mice tumor progression and liver lesions in mice there, and looking at how the omics that we can measure can then link exactly to the phenotype in the cell that we observe. This is in particular a type of carcinoma-derived exosomes, both in vivo and in vitro. So I think that's another way in which machine learning can be part of this overall interdisciplinarity with both physical and bioinformatics techniques. Now, I said at the beginning the importance of public health, and that a lot of cancer cases could be preventable. So I'm also flying the flag for improved public health. Is crucial, as many cancers can be caused by poor water quality. Very simple, straightforward. I'm just going to have a drink now. That's better than what's in there. But in many parts of the world, particularly as we move to the east and the south, to escape controls and benefit from lower costs, polluting industries have been transferred from developed regions to undeveloped regions and trigger the transportation of cancer risk to unprotected regions and people. And I've been working with colleagues at Fudan University in Shanghai for many years on this area, where a lot of the industry along the east coast of China was transferred to the rural areas inland. And you can see that's quite an old paper now, 2013, to the Huai River Basin. And we've been and are still working on cancer in the Huai River Basin. And we use phylogenetics to actually track industrial transfer. So that was published in one of the Nature journals there. And that doesn't go away, because the pollutants go into the water table, they go into the irrigation for the plants, and the toxic materials then gets ingested in the plants. The plants can then be transported not only to other areas in China, but around the world. So it's a very, very important area to look at in terms of food security, not just in one area, whether it's in India or China, but globally, because of the way the food is transferred. Another thing that we found, this was a couple of years ago now. This again is Fudan University colleagues looking at disinfection byproducts. So you might think that if you live in an area where you have water treatment, wow, that's fantastic. The problem is that the disinfection technique itself can actually produce toxic chemicals. So we looked at this, and what you get is nitrosamines in water. Nitrosamines have long been known as potential dangerous chemicals. We looked at the genotoxic potential of mixed nitrosamines using a number of techniques. Particularly, what they do is they produce reactive oxygen species. And what we did this time was look at the NRF2 signaling system, which is the way that cells actually react and try to mitigate against the reactive oxygen species. So this is then the transcriptomics. You get the transcription of the NRF2 signaling system, and that produces antioxidants that can lower the oxidation and the oxidative stress and the cytotoxicity. So looking at NRF2 is actually a very good mechanism and method for seeing whether any particular environmental stress or some element can actually cause oxidative stress. Because if you look at NRF2 activation, as we've done not just here but elsewhere, you know that reactive oxygen species are involved. And that's a very important step because it actually shows a link mechanistically between reactive oxygen species and cancer or other diseases. Many years ago, I remember going to a lecture in one of the departments of the medical school, where it was not known whether reactive oxygen species were involved. Now we do know that. And therefore, that's why compounds like flavonoids and looking at the genes is very, very important. So public health, crucial. Another area where public health is very important is looking at pesticides. Fipronil has been used for many years as a pesticide, and it's banned in most countries. But that doesn't mean to say that it A isn't used and B has disappeared. It has gone into the groundwater in a number of areas, and what we found here that it actually can cause thyroid problems, human thyroid issues, which can then give rise to changes in the whole thyroid metabolism in human, particularly in children. And again, this is via reactive oxygen species that alter the iodide metabolism in the thyroid gland. So I can't stress enough the importance of public health linking with the omics, with all the machine learning, to actually get that out into the public sphere, to make sure that the standards are sufficiently high, that these compounds are monitored and mechanisms are put in place to lower the concentration in even as basic an element of drinking water. I mentioned at the beginning that I was involved in a number of organizations, and one of them is DESC, which is an environmental, come in please, an environmental coordinate system looking at a holistic approach between digital technologies and the physical environment. I've been using lots of these techniques that are very, very important in human health, but of course there's a downside. And what DESC does is emphasize both the positive benefits that we have for these systems here and the negative harms resulting from the use of digital technologies. And it focuses on the entire human environment interface, not just on climate change and carbon. And we look at sustainability of digital technology models. And we're a very mixed bag of people. Some of the work on very remote communities in Borneo. I work particularly on something that involves oceans. So we're now back to the oceans. And I was very, very lucky to be a delegate to the United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon 2022, working with the China Biodiversity and Redevelopment Foundation. As you see, it was a very big meeting. I had really no expectations. It was delayed because of the pandemic from 2020. I just hoped, I didn't know what would happen. In fact, it was an excellent meeting, really full of vitality. And we had Guterres there, Secretary General, who opened the conference, and the presidents of Portugal and Kenya were there too. The area that I've been working on is deep sea mining. Retrieving mineral deposits from the deep sea, and the deep sea, you might be interested to know, is anything below 200 meters. So, I mean, you're not far below the mesophotic area there. And the depleting terrestrial deposits and rising demand for metals that are used in this sort of thing are stimulating interest in the deep sea, with commercial mining imminent. The problem, of course, is that scraping the seafloor and pollution from mining processes, as I show in this figure in the lower left hand there, can wipe out entire species, many yet to be discovered. And what we need to do, and I'm delighted that George Barker is here at the back, and George is my collaborator on a chapter that we have, I think, finished. I'll talk to you about that. I think we're there for a United Nations book on Pacific island communities and territories, because those are the particular communities and the islands which are most at risk of losing all these species because of what I'm just going to say, particularly in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, around about the middle of the Pacific Ocean there. And we just don't have enough studies. Just to show you that there are three sorts of deep sea mining. Polymetallic nodules, such as those in the top left there. Sulfide mining, for example, in the black smokers, like in the bottom left, and also in cobalt-rich ferromanganese crust. These are near active or extinct hydrothermal vents. And they create all these valuable metals that people want to get their hands on. And I could go into more detail there. What I will say in a few minutes is about what's happening currently. This slide is from one of the Nature family of, oh no, sorry, it's Science Advances. What I'd just like you to look at are the relative size of the grey bits. And the grey bits, where we go from the top of the ocean at the top to the deep ocean sediments at the bottom, you can see the number of unknown species that we have. And the most unknown species is right in the deep ocean sediments there. We just don't know enough of what's actually there. It's coming to a head. It's highly controversial. The whole thing is organized by the International Seabed Authority, an autonomous international organization established by the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS for short. And this little island of Nauru is focus for the metals company they want to do all mining, and they've tested all their highly invasive vehicles, and what's going to happen. Who will bear the liability for environmental harm? And the problem is we have a lack of science and a lack of transparency, a lack of adequate scientific knowledge to establish environmental regulations and standards, and mining would impact an area in the CCZ, the Clarion-Clipperton zone, 3 times larger than the combined size of Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, and Germany, with noise and sediment plumes. Should we forge ahead with this at a time of climate change Are we not creating a new problem, trying to solve another one? And the next set of ISA meetings will be critical. And I can tell you exactly when the next ISA meeting is happening, because I'm involved with a group that is trying to influence this. I have the program here, which is taking place on the 18th to the 22nd of March, to look at how they can give licenses for this. And just to mention a number of sessions that they're going to have, showing that the message is actually getting across. So in week 2, that's the 25th to the 29th of March, they're going to have a meeting of the Working Group on Protection and Preservation of the Marine Environment, particularly the Environmental Compensation Fund. George, I think that's encouraging. And later, the protection and preservation of the various ways of paying for it, and finally, intangible cultural heritage definition and protection and preservation of the marine environment. So the language has changed a lot because of what many people have been doing to bring attention to this very important area. When we had our ocean conference, there was actually the launch of a moratorium on deep sea mining by a number of people, a number of presidents of island states, as on the left, and on the right side, you can see on the speaker podium, excuse me, we had Dr. Sylvia Earle, no less, talking about this and urging countries to put their money into science to better understand the world's oceans. That's so important. One of the sessions we had was One Blue Ocean for One Blue Planet. And I think the youngest person, which is there, per picture on the right-hand side there, summed it up. Her grandparents' islands are now non-existent. And these conferences should be held where such people can take part. And it's making sure that we have, as I'm going to say, them integrated in the policy-making process. So we know about climate change. We know that we're not going to adhere to the what they said in the Paris meeting. So what can we do about it? So I and many others have been working on geoengineering. So that's the deliberate large-scale intervention of the Earth's natural systems to counteract climate change. Two sorts: carbon dioxide removal, solar radiation management. And I and colleagues from a university just south of Beijing in Jinan province have been working on reflective aerosol, which you can see at the top right there, and also marine cloud brightening, which you can see in the middle there, cloud seeding from the oceans. And we've looked at marine cloud brightening in the very arid Sahel Arabian zone. It's no good just looking at one part. When we started this work many years ago, 2015, I think it was, we just looked at the Caribbean. We're now looking at much wider areas. And marine cloud brightening does make an increase in the coolest days and a decrease in the hottest days, but it's not enough to reduce the global warming trend. Published that about 3 years ago. We then went on to look at injection of aerosols. This is using machine learning types of techniques to mitigate climate extremes in South Asia, a very, very large region. And we did find that there could be some mitigation there, where we got some significant trends. There's the area we looked at, all the way to Pakistan, Nepal, right through to Bangladesh. And we found there were significant differences in extreme climate responses to the different scenes that we looked at. And what was very interesting is that some of the areas were actually worse under the aerosols than better. And the reason for that, you've got such a wide variety of physical environments there. You've got the ocean, and you've got plains, the Deccan Plateau, you've got the Gangetic Plain, and then you've got the Himalayas, and all the mountains that go along there, and Nepal again very high, and then up to the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. So to summarize what we found, using these machine learning techniques, that aerosols were not an effective tool to mitigate future climate extremes in the whole of South Asia under a global warming scenario. We've then gone on to use hybrid radial basis function networks to create climate maps in an area which is highly vulnerable. That is Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very poor country, very agricultural, and extremely prone to flooding. As you can see from the top right there, it's a lot on the ocean, the delta there, and it gets all the rivers coming in there from Tibet. And as you get melting of glaciers in Tibet, then of course there's increased river flow downstream, and you get much more flooding. So I hope that these techniques, these high resolution techniques we developed, this was published in Berger's data last year, will be useful. And it's very important in Bangladesh because there are not many meteorological stations. So what we've developed is a way of getting detailed information, high resolution maps, even though these meteorological areas are a long way apart. We've then gone on later to look at what we've used, a detrended fluctuation, a DFA analysis, again looking at trends of extreme temperature events, and it's extreme temperature events that are very important. It's not just the average. And that shows an upward trend, with the largest trends, unfortunately, occurring in coastal Bangladesh. So again, a very vulnerable country indeed. But using these machine learning techniques, we can develop systems, and we'll be looking at others now, which I think are going to give these countries a much better handle on what's going to happen in the future. Education is crucial. We're in a very diverse world, and what I'm saying in this slide is that diversity and culture are very important as an equilibrium with performance. So we have people in the middle, we have different ethnicities with different beliefs, different traditions, very diverse. They have different nationalities and very different cultures. But unless we understand those cultures, and that's why travel is so important, an understanding and reading of these cultures is absolutely critical if we're going to get anywhere towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, what we must have is trust in these cultures and in these beliefs. Not just trust taken out of the air, but evidence-based trust. And education helps to bring together the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it'll be a mark of what one can call collaborative civilization. The importance of indigenous communities and youth in decision making, how to get them to the table. I think NGOs, non-governmental organizations, there are many throughout the world, and education at all levels. And we must avoid the mantra of decisions about us without us, as that young lady was saying at the Oceans conference. Above all, youth, you must have a place at the table. It's your world, and all the rest of us can do is pledge our support and do the best we can. And it's only by collaboration and cooperation between people and organizations that we will achieve anything like our Sustainable Development Goals to maintain not only our ocean, but equity rather than just equality in all our areas by 2030. So thanks very much indeed for listening. As T.S. Eliot said in one of his great poems, Little Giddick, one of the four quartets, time past and time future allow but a little consciousness. That consciousness, that time is now. And we all need to be highly conscious of what we do. Here are some of my colleagues from around the world. The top left one is a meeting in Singapore, where we had a meeting of the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. My great friend and collaborator in the middle at the top, Professor Im Zhong, who was Dean of the Graduate School at Fudan, alas, no longer with us. He was killed in 2017 in a car accident. And many others from Fudan, from Chongqing, from Chengchun, and elsewhere. Wuhan, and there at the bottom right is one of my colleagues from Jilin province, and you can recognize Wolfson College there. So thank you very much indeed for listening.
Any question?
Yep.
You have working in different fields. So, could you share with us your experience with interdisciplinary research, the challenges?
Absolutely. You know, it doesn't just happen like that. Well, can I just repeat the question, and then you can see whether I've understood. What you said, how did you cope with all this interdisciplinary work? I think that was it. Yeah. Okay. Well, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't come out of the sky. Linking with quite a bit came through what the Chinese call guanxi, networking. And in fact, my first meeting with Yang Jun up there at the top in the middle came about because there was somebody who worked in our international office, knew him. I think he was her uncle. She knew we were both passionate about research and got us, when I was there in China for a delegation, to meet in Fudan. We got on very well, and we've collaborated ever since. And his group, one of the people, one of the teams that I collaborate with, and we had what I call evidence-based trust. I mean, we worked in such a different way. You know, it's not like collaborating with somebody in London or Cambridge. It's such a different culture, and you need a tremendous amount of work to actually try and understand that culture. And I spent a lot of time doing that, and still do. So you need to be relaxed into the different culture. What you don't want to do is tell them what to do. You know, whether they tell me or you do. We never did that. We worked strictly on the scientific problems. And there on the top right are my collaborators from Fudan University, the head of public health, and from Shaanxi University in the middle, that's Professor Zhu Ren. We work together. Well, I haven't had time to explain the work that we've been doing, but we work very much on the environment and food security, again, to do with public health too. But it needs an awful lot of work and trust, and it doesn't come just like that. And so you need to be totally committed to it and love the culture. I mean, you really have to embrace the culture. You don't have to love all of it. You know, there's things that one can disagree with, and you can agree to disagree. But overall, it's working together in a harmonious way that has been the secret of our success.
Yes, is this on?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, James. I was wondering whether you also thought about using historical database of historical information, texts and images of how humans and plants and animals in the past have responded to climate change.
Yep.
In this type of
Absolutely. And as I'm sure you know, there's a great field of archaeological research that goes right back, and you're involved in that yourself. And I think that's fantastically exciting. Obviously, that's a great growth area, and you can learn a tremendous amount about that, particularly in climate change, and look at how migration of populations, why they migrate, what happened, the climate change that goes on. Why on earth do you get zebras in the middle of the desert in Africa? Well, of course, the reason is the climate has changed enormously, and the trees are gone. So it's all those things that you can learn a tremendous amount from using omics techniques from earlier civilizations, if I could put it like that. Because it's so important. But your point about the text is a very good one, and I know you're highly involved in that. I don't know of anybody who's actually working on that, but it would be interesting with my Chinese colleagues to actually look at the text that could be available. Certainly, when I'm reading books written in the Sung and Ming dynasties, I don't get much information. It's all about people and the way people work. That helps me enormously when I work with the Chinese, but it's not information about the environment so much, except that I know that there were lots of tigers there.
Certainly very interdisciplinary and usually I'm trying to take it away. What I'm interested in is artificial intelligence plus, and or do you see it as the new industrial revolution, or do you see it as just something, you know, machine learning, something that we're already onto, and it's just become a buzzword? I mean, I'd just like to get your
Thank you.
where we are now.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. That's a very good question. I mean, the words artificial intelligence have been around for some time, as you know, and it's only very recently that it's hit the public zeitgeist. For all sorts of reasons, not least to do with the media and people like Donald Trump who've been portrayed, you know, trying to get all his black followers together, you know, all these sort of deep fake things. So you know, it gets a lot of bad press, but you know, when you're using these techniques in a way that can be beneficial, they're enormously powerful. Particularly in prediction, so I'm sure you know, in diagnosis of scans, of scanning, you know, they're better than human beings. So they can be wonderful. But of course, it's like the book. So I think it's like the book. So when you know, Caxton invented the printing press, and you got that shift of power away from the church, much more into the public domain. Obviously, it came with some negatives as well as some positives, and that is, I think, always going to be the situation, whether it's splitting the atom or whether it's all the techniques that we have. I mean, there is so much research going on. I get a lot of information about it, particularly in terms of medicine, and it's always very, very exciting. So the sort of thing that I was talking about in predictive medicine, in trying to look at gene ontology, drug repurposing, that is where I see it can be really enormously helpful. I don't see it as an industrial revolution in a way that, you know, when the cotton mills and the woolen mills came in, a lot of people lost their jobs. Certainly, I think there's going to be a repurposing of people to do different things. One of the areas that I'm very interested in also is autonomous ships. So now over 90% of the world's trade goes via shipping. And at the moment, autonomous ships are pretty successful, but they're only allowed around the coastline. If they then are allowed to go over the deep ocean, wow, I mean, the whole thing would change. You're still going to need people, obviously on the shore to monitor the ships and people on the ships, but you're not going to have the sort of hierarchy on the ships that you've got at the moment. Now, I also work on a maritime charity. And let me tell you that working on a ship is one about the most dangerous thing you can do. It's, you know, for all sorts of reasons, mental health as well as physical things. So there are going to be some benefits, I think, to take people away from actually working on ships and to make, you know, to allow them to work in other areas. It's a bit like when you work in the tropics, as I've done many years, and you have artisanal fishers. Okay, so there are no fish around the island of Jamaica. And Jamaica is one area I know extremely well. No fish, from sharks to anything, no fish. You can't really go out from the coastline because of the overfishing has been fantastic. So if you ban fishing and have what we call marine protected areas, what do you do with the people? And you can repurpose them in all sorts of ways, in terms of tourism, in terms of all the other ways in which they can be developed. You know, these are highly intelligent people, but you know, have a very different mindset. And it comes back to what I said earlier of involving indigenous communities. They live there and they have a knowledge that we don't have. And so it's that interaction that is so important. And we can't tell them what to do. They can tell us what to do, and we have to listen. And that takes a lot of swallowing of pride. And in what you might call the global north, we are very good on pride and power, and that's one of the big problems. We have no global governance. And you know, one of the big questions that I gave a seminar a few weeks ago on ocean governance, and it was written about in the press. You know, we don't have ocean governance. Even with UNCLOS, is pretty woolly actually. I mean, it allows for a lot of loopholes, and we need that global governance. And Britain, you know, need to be involved. You know, we need to be very strong there. Otherwise, other nations will take over. I hope that's in a way answered your question. Yeah.
There is one question online. It's a less scientific question, but it's asking, are you optimistic for the future of the oceans?
Am I optimistic for the future of the oceans? Well, if I could sort of rephrase your question, if I may, am I optimistic for the future of the planet? Because as I said, we live on planet ocean. You know, the planet wouldn't be there without the ocean. So you have to be, in a way, looking at the planet, and the ocean is a major part of that. Yes, I mean, the planet will survive. We may not survive. You know, there are species which are going to be lost. There's no question about that. You know, we've, as a human race, we've done pretty well. Mammals were this sort of small mouse-like creature, you know, several tens of millions of years ago. That was the first one, and I think we've done pretty well as pretty badly. You know, we lots of positives and lots of negatives, but that's in the nature of evolution. I mean, I saw a horrific video last night in a zoo, I won't mention the country, of a baboon that was torturing a little civet in a zoo. And I'm sure you might have seen orcas, you know, tossing seals about. You know, we're not far from that in here in terms of the genes, in terms of the human experience. And of course, we have to make sure to try and get that collaborative civilization against this tremendous surge of necessity for growth and power. I mean, a long time ago in the 1970s, the Club of Rome. Anybody heard of the Club of Rome? Thank you. Developed this wonderful monograph on limits to growth. That was over 50 years ago. Limits to growth. That was certainly for me as a doctoral student at the time. It was a revelation, you know, and I've held to it ever since. You know, we're still there. We're still battling the same arguments. You know, they're still going on in the same way, but the situation is getting worse. So I haven't answered your question. Yes, I am optimistic, actually, but not everything will survive.
Thank you. More questions? From my side, I would have like one more question. It's a bit more technical. And I'm really interested in a couple of slides before you were showing some radial basis function approaches.
Yeah.
And in general, what I see mostly coming up in AI applications is that there's always like the roughness of real world data. It's always very sparse.
Yes,
and it's a really interesting approach to generate synthetic data that you can do analysis on and do statistical significance analysis, and then you just like evaluate different metrics that you don't have enough real data for. And what I would like to ask in this situation, what do you find about these machine learning models that are estimating the distribution?
Very good question. Of course, an absolutely crucial question, because you've got to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to be working. So what we do, we use, of course, training data sets, and we look at what we would have predicted in past years, and we look at how good that is. So we use data sets, training data sets. We use data, real data. We're looking at the past, and you know, you're constantly changing these models, you know, to get better and better statistical validity. It's an ongoing process. I mean, the one that I've showed you is the best at the moment, but somebody else may then come on and do a better one, and we may come on and do a better one. You've got to continually, you know, revisit the algorithms all the time. It's a big thing, but getting that predictive confidence is really what you need. So you've got to get the data sets right. And that's, you know, whether you're doing diseases and gene ontology or those meteorological data stations, it's the same sort of statistical techniques. So we use a lot of them.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, then we will ask the long Q&A quite the flower time, and we'd like to thank you so much for your presentation. It's been a real honor to have you here as a presenter, and please give another round of applause for us.
Thank you.